visiting assistant professor here. This is my first semester. I taught a class, Dance History, the 20th Century American Modern Dance History. And what you're going to see is presentations that the students have done that is unique and interesting to their own understanding and their relationship to dance. Some of it has to do with a lot of representation, social and cultural issues. Some of it has to do with aesthetic issues and the way. And I'll let them talk about what they're going to do. So thank you for coming, and we're going to start.
Hi, I'm Saray Smender, and I'm going to speak about Steve Paxton and the second revolution of 20th century American modern dance. Before I came to Middlebury, modern dance to me was a strictly choreographed and precisely executed form of entertainment. It was accompanied by structurally identical pre-recorded music and performed on a proscenium stage. Modern dance was capable of being evaluated largely on the basis of the performer's technical skill, which was directly correlated to the amount of time and effort put into training the body to execute or imitate specific codified movements as accurately as possible. At Middlebury, I have developed an entirely new understanding of what dance can be. Looking back through time, I can identify one initial source of the voices that have most strongly influenced my new perspective. This source created what we might call the second revolution of 20th century modern dance in America. I am referring specifically to the Judson Dance Theater in the 1960s and 70s New York. The collective work of many individuals involved in this group has been classified as postmodern dance. So, what is postmodern dance? Good question. Why am I here in my casual wear doing a performance? Also a good question. Sally Bain speaks of postmodern dance as a form which foregrounded the medium of dance rather than its meaning. Games, sports, walking, running, and other everyday activities were presented as dance. The dance was a dance because of context rather than content. The Grand Union, a group which grew out of the Judson Dance Theater, and specifically the work of Yvonne Rainer, was an improvisation collective formed in 1970. One of the performers, David Gordon, describes one of the group's 2-hour concerts by saying that an audience of 200 people showed up. About half an hour in, it had dwindled to 150. Another half an hour, and there were 100. Until finally, there were only 12 to 20 people left in the audience by the end of the performance. But what mattered was that those few people were deeply moved and eager for more. So this is Steve Paxton. He's one member of the Judson Dance Theater and the Grand Union, both. And the work I just performed was an improvisation based on his work. So Paxton was trained in martial arts and tumbling, and he performed with seminal choreographers of the 1960s, including Jose Ramon and Merce Cunningham. Through his work, he sought to break down barriers between dancers and non-dancers, and to undermine some of the hierarchies that were assumed to be inherent in modern dance. In many of his works, such as Untitled Lecture, audience performances, and collaboration with Winter Soldier, Paxton dealt with issues of war, censorship, and civic responsibility. These themes reflect his engagement with the particular social and political context of the time period. He also incorporated Aikido and sought to engage his audience through open contact jams. The 3 themes of politics, engagement with non-Western cultures and ideas, as well as audience participation, were all characteristic of this wave of postmodern dance in general across the board. So in 1972, Paxton developed the famous form contact improvisation. Contact improvisation was formed with strong political and social connotations. Fundamentally, contact improvisation is simply the spontaneous communion and interaction of 2 bodies or more in the space. Paxton describes this technique as pleasant, highly stimulating, and elemental. An early definition by Paxton and some of his colleagues defined contact improvisation as spontaneous physical dialogues that range from stillness to highly energetic exchanges. Alertness is developed in order to work in an energetic state of physical disorientation, trusting in one's basic survival instincts. It is a free play with balance, self-correcting the wrong moves and reinforcing the right ones, bringing forth a physical, emotional truth about a shared moment of movement that leaves the participants informed, centered, and enlivened. By exploring free movement and touch with other bodies, Paxton was pushing up against social norms of physical individuality and autonomy, and of following strict rules of staying still, focused and attentive the way that children are taught in school. We can see how the structures of hierarchy, with the choreographer reigning over the performer's expression and movement, is rejected as the contact improviser is completely freed. Paxton sought to strip the dance down to a highly personalized and unique experience, and thus revive a culturally suppressed human ability to be attentive to the corporeal experience of movement. The contact improviser was asked to give up control and habit, and instead to be highly aware of reflexes and sensations. So Paxton's teaching encourages the individual to make decisions rather than to submit to authorities. In the practice of contact improvisation, each person must be attentive to how their decisions and the decisions of others must play out moment to moment. In this sense, they are actively in charge of their own rights and freedoms. Paxton's training encouraged students to cultivate a greater awareness of how they habitually act in order to ultimately potentially shift these power dynamics and be more assertive players in their own fates. I feel that the ways in which contact improvisation could be translated into a greater social and political context are remarkable, but I do think that it's also important to consider the inherent limitations of contact improvisation as a form that initially only reached a relatively small homogeneous population. That said, I would like to take a moment, if I could get some audience participants, to go over just a few fundamentals of contact improvisation so that some people can experience them firsthand. Anyone who wants to come up, no pressure, but if you'd like to learn, I'm here. So, any volunteers? Or not, okay. And if we could get an even number so that we can have a partnership going on here. Thank you.
Just go ahead and take your shoes off.
Oh, sorry.
You don't want those shoes on for this.
Oh yes, please take the shoes off. Thank you.
Socks too? You're fine. No, your socks are okay. Your socks are okay.
Anyone else? I promise it's not at all scary. We're just going to do a couple things.
Should I get your classroom?
All right, we're just going to need one more volunteer. Oh good, we got 4. Awesome. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to ask you to do, and the audience, you can just kind of imagine that you're doing this too. So find a comfortable standing position and close your eyes. No one's going to hurt you, I promise. I'll watch. And just tuning into your alignment. Notice if you're holding any unnecessary muscular tension. Try to kind of let it go. Find a position that feels stable to you. This is your standing position. You feel grounded, I hope. Now, hopefully you've noticed that actually in this position of stillness, there's quite a lot of movement going on. And this is what we refer to as the small dance. So this dance of reflexes that's working to keep you in an upright position. It's actually, if you think about it, you have 2 feet, which provides a relatively small amount of surface area for your whole tall, lanky, precarious body. So there's this fine balance going on, this fine tuning of the reflexes to keep you upright. Okay, and you can open your eyes now. So this small dance is important to contact improvisation as a way of cultivating readiness. And in contact improvisation, while it is about interacting with other bodies, there still is this individual place to come back to. And it also, having that awareness of the small dance and those reflexes, not only can cultivate the readiness to act when you need to, if you need to catch yourself or something like that, but also to be tuned into sensation. Okay, and just one more I'd like to do with you guys is the rolling point of contact. So if with your partner, find one place of contact, maybe the back of your hand or something. And so as a fact of reality, they have 2 ways of sort of being in contact right now. One would be, if they're going to move, they can slide, or they can roll. So yeah, try the sliding for a minute, see how that feels. It creates a kind of friction, and you can imagine that if you were lifting each other right now and having that sort of sliding feeling with a lot of weight, it could potentially be uncomfortable. However, there's another option called the rolling point of contact. So see if you can try to just roll that point. So keeping one point the whole time, how can you roll through to change that point? Yeah. Better. Yeah, and these guys have got, they're moving through space, they're turning. They're endless possibilities, but the point is that there are these different ways of being in contact that can be helpful when you are receiving weight, when you're giving weight, if you're launching yourself up onto someone. Having these different ways of being efficient with movement with another body is really important. Okay, thank you, volunteers. So I just want to briefly mention a couple more of these. This is by no means a comprehensive list of everything, this is not like a checklist, here you go, boom, 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 you know all these things, and you're a contact improviser. Yeah, I mean, maybe. So falling and rolling is really important, and ultimately what you want to get at with that is being able to fall with fluidity, efficiency, speed, falling from higher heights, being comfortable, and a lot of this is also about, brings me to, well, we won't go there yet, but so falling and rolling is important, and this is kind of where the Aikido comes in, which I mentioned earlier, that Steve Paxton has studied and included extensively in his work. And another one is no hands dance. So there's this tendency, if you're working and you're interacting with someone, you're touching, wow, okay. The first thing that you maybe think of is like, oh, I'm falling, like I'm gonna grab you. And getting all, the hands are just, or even if you're not falling and you're just, you think contact, I'm gonna touch you. I'm gonna touch you with my hand. So the whole idea here is to open up your awareness to other parts of the bodies and other ways that you can touch. So, like your elbow, your knees, your everything. So, also, this relates to opening up your backspace, because we have a tendency to want to, we can see this is in front of me, I want to touch this way. And so opening up the backspace is about finding other parts of the body to initiate from, sort of being, again, it's about tuning into your sensations, and also about having a 360-degree awareness. You really want to have peripheral vision if you're in a contact jam and somebody is launching themselves at you. Having your peripheral vision opened up, as well as having sensation in all directions, is very important. Okay, and then just one other point here. Weight exchange, counterbalance, and off balance. So there's this idea that when you are improvising with somebody in contact improvisation, that you want to kind of strive to have this continual off balance sense, and that leads to a lot more interesting options with lifting and weight sharing. And the sense of continuous off balance weight exchange, while being the key to easeful improvised partnering and connection, is probably the most frequently missing element in contemporary contact repertories today. What happens is dances that are contact improvisation turn into these fast, independent, I'm gonna run and jump and do my thing over here, and then it becomes hard to bring it back to the basic touching and lifting, and those things get lost. They only come in occasionally, a second, and then you're back off on your own. So I actually find this to be true from a personal anecdote. Last semester I was studying abroad in Taiwan, and I went to a couple of contact jams, and I was assuming there would be touch, because that's what contact improvisation is. You're interacting with another body and there is physical contact. And actually, it was much like this idea of the individual improvising, and then every once in a while you come together and you have a moment and then you go off. So probably for the whole hour and a half, I might have been in contact with one person each time for 1 minute. So that said, one of the great things about contact improvisation is that it has spread internationally and has become popular and very important in the dance world. And I would like to take the chance just quickly to show you a clip from 1972 so that you can get a sense of what this form looked like back when it was first originated, because there are many, many iterations of it that have been changing all the time.
After examining the passage from up to down, I look at the range of the passage from the small dance of standing to the linked falls of walking, to large swoops and dives from high points on other bodies. The act of falling has come to include an ability to adapt to the variables of distance, position, and direction and to intuit which part of my body will take the first moment of impact. The first part that touches the ground, I can use as a lever. By extending to that part, I can unify limbs and torso to prepare a sequence which will smoothly transmit my weight and accumulated momentum into the floor.
So as you can see, there's a lot of, on the one hand, trusting yourself and being, ready to take your own weight, and also, on the other hand, a lot of kind of trusting that the other partner is there with you. So that's all I have tonight. Thank you so much for listening.
Hi everyone, can you hear me? Yeah, okay, great. It's just hard to tell up here by yourself. So my name is Chelsea, and I'm here to talk to you a little bit about this connection between belly dancing and ecofeminism. So you might be thinking, this is really weird. Where did this come in a dance history class? And it's kind of true. It was a little strange. I came upon this subject, I came to dance as a newcomer this semester, coming into dance history, and I found it very fascinating. And we have done some different studies talking about the issues of race and gender in dance and how those have impacted the way people dance and the way people move and where and how and why. And so I wanted to explore this idea of feminism in dance. And I am an environmental studies major here at school. And so this idea of ecofeminism was very appealing to me. So I was searching around trying to find a way that I could connect these two ideas. And what I came across was this idea of belly dancing and ecofeminism. And that will make more sense to you as we go on, I promise. So talking a little bit more about my personal statement, ecofeminism as an idea has changed my perspective by connecting the dots between my body, my earth, and my society. As a woman who has felt societal pressures and waged a war on my own body and mind, I am struck by the parallels between the treatment of women and the environmental degradation. On a journey to heal my body and mind, I also endeavor to heal the earth and help the people in my life connect back to the earth and themselves. I feel one very essential way to do this is through dance. Dance unifies the body and mind, brings communities together, and with that kind of power, why shouldn't dance be the vehicle by which we connect body and earth? If this is the vehicle I choose, what course shall I chart? What obstacles may arise as I attempt to combine these aspects of my life? And so this was the premise that I set out with as I was diving into this topic. And as you will see, there were definitely obstacles that arose in my research in this, what I thought was a very straightforward, beautiful way to combine ecofeminism and belly dancing. So in this talk, I'm going to go through a brief history of what ecofeminism is for anyone who doesn't know, and then I will attempt to explain to you how it became linked with belly dancing and how through my research I saw these two things as connected. I will then explain the modern ideas of ecofeminism, how they've changed since the beginnings in the 1970s, as well as some of the leaders in the fields of both ecofeminism and belly dancing, the technique of belly dancing, and controversies that I encountered in combining these two concepts. So, the history of ecofeminism. To begin, it emerged in the 1970s as a diverse social movement because it combined the agenda of the ecology movement, which is also known as the Green Movement, that during this time period became known as what today we call environmentalism. And so it combined environmentalism with the ideas of feminism, hence the word ecofeminism. So this idea of women's oppression is said to have risen, not idea, women's oppression is said to have risen as modern industrial society split from matriarchal cultures. And so the idea of the male culture and the female nature emerges from this shift. So it's very interesting with how gendered these two ideas become. And in a patriarchal society, there's a preference for material capitalistic culture that fundamentally rejects nature. And because nature is gendered as feminine by this theory, then by extension, women are oppressed due to their link with the cycles of life. So ecofeminism also has a spiritual aspect to it, and there are more spiritually oriented ecofeminists, but to them, this idea of the goddess was central to women's fight against patriarchal domination in the power that the goddess held as a figure for them. So goddess feminism captured the sacredness of both non-human nature and the human body. And so the idea of that is meant to be a very equalizing and egalitarian one. So goddess worship creates no hierarchy, no centralized institutions, no monumental structures, and no liturgy in that. And so this idea came in opposition to the very much ingrained ideas that came along with the Judeo-Christian religious views that poses women in the Bible as coming after and also from man. So in creation, Eve was made from the rib of Adam, and in the story of creation, there later were created children and then animals, and further along the line were plants, and at the very bottom of everything was created the ground of nature, and that's, you know, everything that we stand on out there. And so there is very clearly a hierarchy that appears in this more traditional structure. So what spiritual ecofeminists try to do is to celebrate women's reproductive capabilities and their supposed sacred association with nature as a source of strength, power, and virtue, rather than as being a point of oppression and a way to lessen them and weaken them. So now we're going to connect belly dancing and the feminist body. So we're talking about how spiritual ecofeminists celebrate the reproductive capabilities of women. And that comes to this idea of a woman's essence, which is assumed to be universal and is identified with women's biology and the characteristics of nature that they hold. So this supposition of a universal women's essence was taken up vigorously by belly dance cultures in the 1970s. So they assumed that all women held their strength and power in their bellies because that's where their reproductive and sexual organs were from. So through belly dance, women attempted to unearth their essential female nature. And that was the goal or the idea that they took on. So in defining modern ecofeminism, we see the domination of women and the degradation of nature are intrinsically linked, as we talked about before, and that idea has maintained since the 1970s. Today, we see that there is no unified concept of ecofeminism. There are many different ideas about it, and there is disagreement as to whether the nature of the female, of the gendered female nature connection is potentially liberating, as it can be a very grounding and powerful source for women, or whether it constitutes grounds for reinforcing harmful stereotypes about women. And I think we're all pretty clear with those stereotypes about women being the child bearers and women, you know, having this innate sense to know things that maybe you couldn't find in that capitalist culture, but that might come from the earth. And so those stereotypes definitely could be reinforced by these ideas. It can be problematic when arguments are based on an assumed cultural universalism that is biological determinism, because we know that not every woman identifies in this way. And so it's difficult to say that there's this one universal, you know, women's essence that is taken up by belly dancing and that that's carried through. Racial essentialism also becomes problematic when you combine these two ideas, as indigenous cultures hold a great appeal for ecofeminists. And in the 1970s, we also saw this idea of the ecological Indian was arising, and how their ideas were appropriated and taken out of context and used in the belly dancing culture, just in a way that it wasn't necessarily meant to be taken, or that not necessarily holds true for all of the people within that culture that they're representing. So another criticism of this idea also focuses on the mystical connection rather than on women's actual condition. So if we're talking about this idea of the woman's essence and grounding down through her reproductive organs, and that's where her power is held, people could say that nothing is actually being done to alleviate the oppression that our society is putting on women. So now we're going to go on to talk a little bit about Daniela Giuseppe, and she, in the 1970s, was one of America's leading belly dancers. She traveled America and Europe performing the multimedia piece, The Birth Dance, a celebration of women and the earth in poetry, music, and dance. She performed this work for the New Feminist Talent Agency. She is also the author of the satirical novel, The Great American Belly Dance. And The Great American Belly Dance, I will give you a little bit of a summary of this book. I haven't actually read it myself, just so everyone knows, but it's about a recently divorced woman who is contemplating suicide, and shortly after the divorce, she sees the sign for a belly dancing class, and on a whim, she just goes and takes the class. And very quickly, she becomes absorbed in this world of belly dancing, and even disconnected from the material and social world, as she dives into this idea of self-discovery that's leading her to experience her body in a new way. So she is taken so strongly to this new art form that she continues to dance and lecture at many prominent feminist gatherings, and it's even taken to the national level. So this work is a satire because the author, Daniela Giuseppe, wrote it as somewhat of an autobiography, but she creates it as sort of a caricature of herself. And so everything is very exaggerated, and it takes these ideas of the women's essence and makes them over the top. And so it's kind of pointing out the follies of this idea of the ecofeminism and belly dancing, while also pointing to the value that it holds. So then moving on to this issue of racial essentialism that I came across. Native American culture was an influential referent for ecofeminism in the late 1970s. And during that time, we saw indigenous peoples being defined as non-industrial or pre-industrial. And as such, they were seen as a more ecological culture. In other words, they were not harming the environment in the same ways that we were. So the belly dancing community and the ecofeminist community saw these as very beautiful things, and they appropriated native ritual dances that prayed to the earth and to Mother Nature. Another way, I'm going to talk a little bit about Pocahontas here. So she's considered the original ecofeminist by some, at least in the sense of a media figure that you would see representing an ecofeminist. And that's an example of racial essentialism, in the sense that, she was a native, and they are very much playing up on these stereotypes that we hold for the native people. So another idea that we have is the appropriation of the original Oriental ideas of belly dancing and where belly dancing came from, and how they became very westernized. So that's where I'm going to head to next to this discussion, is talking about cultural imperialism and westernization. So belly dance originated in the dances of the Middle East, which is very far from where I came across it and where I'm sure all of you have come across it. So being severed from its historical and cultural source, it became a westernized form and a hybrid dance that incorporated many other more American ideas and American movement within this original art form that had a very religious background. And so the history of belly dancing, we see belly dance was the dance of birth and fertility in ancient cultures, and it was considered their form of Lamaze exercise for preparation of the body for birthing. The dance of life and celebration of the female's magical ability to bring life forth from her womb. The belly rolls of the ancient Mid-Eastern dance represented birth contractions. Now it has been degraded to a new form of burlesque that women were forced to perform for a sexist society. We also have how-to books of belly dancing. So the Serena technique of belly dancing is probably the most famous how-to book for belly dancing. And just the fact that they have a how-to book suggests that it is less about that inherent knowing and that women's essential, essence, and more of an art form that requires discipline and coordination between the mind and the body. One that you must learn and practice to develop power, stamina, and skills to execute properly. So we see how belly dance can be seen in one way or in another way where it is viewed as just an art form. And on the cover here, which is the original image of the Serena technique of belly dancing, the little caption that you might not be able to read says, "Belly dancing is a fun way to keep fit, feel relaxed, and expand your creativity." So belly dance has moved so far away from its origins that it's hard to even recognize where it came from. And we're going to watch a little clip here of Serena, as she is a very famous
New York City, 1950s. You can find anything here in the melting pot of the world, where an Italian bakery truck, after its last delivery, would take me and my mother to another world across town, where immigrants brought the music and dance of their culture, instruments such as the oud, saz, kanun, and bouzouki. And others from long ago. Up a whole street of clubs from 1940s Istanbul. The Egyptian Gardens was an exciting mixture of class and seediness, enchanting cultural art and backroom intrigue, and I loved every bit of it.
When you go on YouTube, there's some really strange things that pop up when you type in belly dancing. All right, so now going off of this idea of the how-to book, there is a defined belly dancing technique at its most basic form. There are 7 core families of movement, And those are the lifts and drops, slides, shimmy, twists, circles, figure eights, and undulations. And so these are grouped by the shape you're making with your body, and they're then subdivided by the part of the body you are moving. So it's not just the hips and the feet that you're moving, but also the chest and the shoulders and the neck and the hands, arms, and head. And there is a strong importance placed on the hands as well. So moving on, connecting the idea of the lessons, the technique lessons taught, and ecofeminism. There is a general traveling principle that is taught in belly dance, and it states, allow your feet to fall into the earth. Pause there. Mother Earth then brings energy in through your feet to your center, your inner body, nourishing you. Imagine your body like a tree. Your feet, the roots that need to be in the earth connected to it. Your body, the trunk, and the energy you give out from your heart through your hands and fingers are the fruit. And so this very clearly defines the dancer as relating to nature. And belly dancing is generally considered a feminine form of dance as it is relating to the belly and the feminine power coming from the belly and their reproductive organs. And therefore, I think it's safe to make that connection back to ecofeminism. Another quote that I came across is that strength for her movement is picked up by the belly dancer from her belly, the lower part of her body where her balance is centered. Even her finger movements draw their energy from her belly. And so again, that just goes back to this idea of the woman's essence that they're drawing from. But as I said before, you can see both sides of this issue when it comes to that. The last slide that I have is talking about that mystical connection that I talked about and this idea of activism. So some people suggest that there is too much focus on this idea that is not a concrete one of the connection between women and nature, and that we should aim to focus on the conditions of women and to physically help them through action. So I think that you can find a balance between spirituality and activism, and I think that dance can be a channel for this in a way. So I have one last quote that says, fuller exploration of ecofeminism probably goes beyond the expertise of just one person. It needs a cooperation of a team that brings together historians of culture, natural scientists, and social economists who would all share a concern for the interconnection of domination of women and exploitation of nature. It needs visionaries to imagine how to construct a new socioeconomic system and a new cultural consciousness that would support relations of mutuality rather than competitive power. For this one, it needs poets, artists, and liturgists, as well as revolutionary organizers to incarcerate more life-giving relationships in our cultural consciousness and social system. Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question? Because I'm confused about particularly the talk about indigenous cultures and the modern culture of ecofeminism. It seemed like you're saying that at one point in time, belly dancing was originated, and it was non-sexual, and it was a ritual, and then it somehow after the Industrial Revolution got sexualized. Similarly, indigenous cultures being closer to the earth after the Industrial Revolution became patriarchies. I mean, I'm confused. Like, indigenous cultures are not sexist and patriarchal?
No, sorry. It's a very complicated issue for sure. And in a 20-minute PowerPoint, it's really difficult to explain, and I probably got confused in my talking somewhere along there. But no, what I'm trying to say is that they idealized these, or they meaning the belly dancing community that has taken on these ideas, idealized these indigenous communities. So I'm not saying that they aren't patriarchal in nature, but they didn't view them as such, and they just took this idea of earth-loving and appropriated their rituals to fit the needs that they saw. So it really wasn't in context or what was necessarily occurring at all, but they just...
So you're saying that ecofeminists and the belly dance community appropriated and continued stereotypes of indigenous cultures.
Yeah,
Okay.
ultimately that's what I found, which was disappointing to me because that's not what I set out. Like I set out
Right.
with this great, thought this was an amazing thing, but I ended up finding out that that seems to be the case.
No, it's interesting. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank
Yeah, I'm sorry that that was confusing.
No, it's great.
Does that make more sense?
Oh,
now?
absolutely.
Okay,
Yes.
sounds good. Does anyone else have any other questions? All right.
I actually have one more question.
Yeah.
Can you imagine drawing any parallels to the modern fad of pole dance classes?
Definitely. That's one thing that I didn't really have time to explore in this, but it's belly dancing has been taken and westernized so much that in reading even the quote from the Serena Technique how-to book, which is from the 1970s, which was quite a long time ago at this point, but they talked about how it's a form of exercise, and I think that that really is what it has become in to many Americans. It's just a form of exercise and a way to get like super hot abs or whatever. And so I think that it definitely could be related to that in that sense. I don't know a whole lot about the history of pole dancing or where that came from, but I think if I had to venture a guess, yes, I think they both have been westernized and taken in a different direction because pole dancing has become a thing that people do in gyms and everything just for a form of exercise and very much out of context. So yeah. All right, thank you.